month that we recite this mysterious prayer about the moon, or over the moon, call it. And in this prayer, as we discussed yesterday, we praise Hashem for creating the luminaries of the heaven, the sun and the moon and the stars, the entire astrological system. And we ask that the restored to its full glory. And then what do? We top it off with a celebratory dance. So what I'd like to do is to review those points and to look at those messages and lessons that we can learn from this, because we explained the meaning of this prayer. We said, first of all, it's in the Torah itself, as you can see this verse here that we discussed yesterday, where we were looking at the source in the Torah itself of Rosh Chodesh and how the system works and the additional sacrifices that were offered on this day. And then we went on to how Maimonides showed us how the months are calculated in the Jewish way, that it used to be a sanctification of the moon. It wasn't just an ordinary, arbitrary decision. It wasn't just a calendar like we have today, but rather there were witnesses who would see the new moon and they would declare that it should be Rosh Chodesh after they sighted the new moon. And then we went into the details in Shulchan Aruch, where it tells us how today we are meant to sanctify the moon. And we discussed the idea of how our calendar was formulated by Hillel when the temple was destroyed, about 200-300 years after, how we formulated it. By the way, this calendar that he formulated is a 6,000-year calendar. It's going to expire in just over 200 years. So by then, surely we will already have our system renewed, right? But then we looked at this particular prayer that we say in Kiddush Levana, that Hashem should restore the moon to its full glory. What does that mean? What is the meaning? What is the significance of this prayer? Also, we said that in the prayer we talk about David Melech Yisrael Chai V'Kayam, the King David, the King of Israel, and his dynasty lives and endures, and in a sense, it's talking about our history. No matter how many times there were enemies who tried to annihilate and destroy us, here we are, we still exist. And this, of course, is not just about the history of the Jewish people, which we experienced many bright times and some very dark eras. We've endured throughout like the moon. And that's what we were discussing, the significance that the moon, you look at it, the moon symbolizes our people's history, but it's also, this COVID. The moon is symbolic of each and every one of us individually as well, that we have our ups and downs. But if you look at our history, we see that despite the ups and downs, not only do we survive, but here we are, Am Yisrael, we thrive. And so we look forward to the time when the moon will be restored to its luminance, to its brightness. And likewise, we say that the Jewish people as a whole, we look forward to that day that we too will be restored to be the great light in the world that we once were. And of course, we don't just anticipate that, we precipitate it. And that's perhaps the idea of the dancing and celebrating, but it also has to do with the way we behave, the way we live our lives, what we do. Each and every moment is an anticipation of that great day in the future. And so we say in our prayer that God will restore the moon to its full brilliance. We mentioned King David's endurance and the Jewish people's survival. And we concluded yesterday with the story of Shammai, very famously known story, but we gave it a different twist. The story of Shammai, of the person who comes to him and says, I want to convert to Judaism while I stand on one foot. And Shammai chases him away. But perhaps Shammai is telling him there's no such thing as a pick and choose Judaism. I only want the happy times. I only want the good times. You know what? That's just unrealistic, Shammai is saying. If you want to embrace Judaism, you have to understand, you can't just have the fun and the good times and the pleasures of Judaism. Judaism is an all-inclusive experience. And yes, we have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. There are 248 positive commandments, and there are 365 negative. They're a package deal. Yes, with Judaism comes kosher and Shabbos and Yom Tov and all the laws and the restrictions and all the beautiful elements and aspects. But not only that, perhaps he's telling this fellow, you really want to convert to Judaism? You know that with it comes hatred, animosity, anti-Semitism, discrimination, bigotry, all the other problems of the world. Are you sure you can handle that? You understand that it's a privilege to be a Jew. And sometimes there's going to be envy. There's going to be jealousy. There's going to be people out there who are going to be out to get you. And guess what? That's the ups and downs of Judaism. And perhaps the dancing that we do is symbolic of that idea that it's both feet in the dance, the ups and the downs, the ins and the outs, like a dance. That's all part of the Jewish experience. And now, my friends, we're going to go a little bit further out, post this story, and we're going to look at some other aspects, some other angles, some other ideas that we could learn from this, the waxing and waning of the moon, and lessons for ourselves, for our own life, lessons that we could grow and learn from here. So let's look at this particular words in the Kiddush Levana ceremony, Sasim Usmeichim. We talk about the joy and happiness to fill out the will of the Creator, which we say is a reference to all of God's creations. The thing is, they don't have freedom of choice, whereas we do. So when we look at this idea of the dancing in Kiddush Levana, let's go back to these profound words from the Rabbi. He says there's a type of dancing where one person is far from the other and they come closer and further. I don't know all the dances out there. I'm not sure if the Irish dances or if the Russian dances are like that. Certainly the Jewish dancers. You know, you dance at a chasana. There's a lot of that in and out, dancing towards each other and back from each other, right? You have that aspect and element. And perhaps that's analogous to the idea that to serve God, yes, we should be like the sun with consistency, with constantly doing what we have to. And the sun is constantly shining in the sky. It's true. We should never diminish. But the reality is, as human beings, is that we have our ups and downs. We have our ins and outs. We wax and wane like the moon. And so I think it's a very profound message that our very, Moshe Rabbeinu taught us that Moshe led a most productive life, crafting possibly the greatest resume a person has ever created. Just look at Moshe Rabbeinu. And on the one hand, you could say, he had impediments. At his birth, he was already disadvantaged, thrown and cast into the Nile River. And he had a speech impediment due to the incident we discussed about where he put the coal into his mouth. But yet, even Moshe understood. Of course, we look at all the successes and what he did and how he brought the Jewish people out of Egypt and how he spoke one-on-one with God and how he brought the plagues upon Egypt and leading the Jews 40 years through the desert and giving us the Torah, all that. And it wasn't easy, as we've been learning the parashas over the weeks and seeing that journey and the challenges and struggles and the hard time the people gave him. But even he understood that when the day comes and life feels stable without fluctuation, then the game is over. Life is, look at this picture, look at the waves, right? Life is a pulsating experience. And that's life. Just take a second and feel your pulse right here. It's beating. Right? In, out, in, out. Look at an ECG monitor and you'll see the ups and the downs, right? That's life. I always tell my patients exactly that. It's a good sign. You're alive. If it's flat, you're dead. That's what life is. And we have to ride the waves of life. We have to realize that in life, we're going to experience these ups and downs. It's a pulsating experience. The moment the pulse is gone, the life it propels is finished. And that's a very important message we have to know. This is the beauty of the human experience. Yes, there's ups and downs, but such is life. And let's just dance with it. Ride the waves. And here are the words that Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, to the Jewish people. Vayomer Aleichem, Moshe said to them, Ben me'avi esri manoichi ayev. He says, I'm 120 years old today. You know what they said to him that day? Have a nice day. Just joking. He says, I can no longer go or come. Hashem amar alai le'saver sayarden hazeh. And God said to me, you shall not cross this Jordan. Now, the classic rabbinic interpretation of this is that Moshe was no longer able to practice his teaching of the Jewish people and to lead them in that sense. But I want to share with you a fascinating insight from Rabbi Tzadok Akon of Lublin. And this insight, I think, is very profound that we have to learn from. Let's read it together. Says Rabbi Tzadok, a person must always journey from one level to the next till he reaches his final plateau. This is the meaning of what it stated. And Moshe went. Namely, Moshe was constantly climbing from level to level until the final journey enumerated in our Torah parsha, of which he states, I can no longer go or come. With these words, Moshe expressed that he was no longer able to go, namely to fall from his perch, and thus he was no longer able to come, namely to use that as a springboard to climb even higher. Says Reb Tzadok, this idea is expressed in the verse, a righteous person falls and arises 7 times. In the spirit of what our sages teach in the Talmud, that these falls are for the purpose of climbing even higher. Parenthetical note, there's an expression oftentimes used in Chassidus, Yerida l'tzarech aliyah. Like when you want to throw the ball, what do? Oftentimes you're going to go down and then up. And in life, when we experience a down, we realize it's to bring us even higher up. So Rabbi Tzadok tells us here an interpretation of this verse about Moshe Rabbeinu, that when the righteous person falls, he summons up strength that propels him even higher than where he previously was. He's thus considered to be on a journey, and as much as the fall is only for the purpose of climbing higher. However, when the righteous person is no longer able to fall, he can no longer climb higher either. And that is indeed his plateau. And I think it's a profound lesson, because here you have Moshe Rabbeinu's final words to his people, to his flock. What does he say to them? He says, I can no longer go and come. Now, simply, what does that mean? Rabbi Tzadok is telling us Moshe was so loyal to the idea of life that it come and go and fall and pick ourselves back up again, that life is destined to fluctuate. And when he reached this plateau, as Rabbi Tzadok puts it, this pinnacle of his service, he felt that, he's no longer able to fall and to get back up. That's where he says game over. And that's where he departed. He left. But until that day, the Torah tells us he kept going. He kept strong. Vayelech, it's a sign of life, movement, to keep going, to do what you have to do. And each one of us, I think, need to know that lesson as well, especially since we're in this group, everyone's under 120 still. So you got plenty of time to go strong. I think very, very important message and lesson to each and every one of us. Any thoughts or questions on this idea itself, which is quite profound? Okay.
One question, not related. It just struck me. Moshe had a speech impediment. How did he relay all the messages from God to Bnei Israel?
It's a good question. Firstly, in general, about speaking, that Moshe, he put aside his ego. And generally speaking, he said, it wasn't about my words. It's the words of God that I'm conveying. And he said, Lo ish dvar manech, I'm not a person of words, yet he probably was the greatest orator, teacher of Jewish history. Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our teacher. Yet at the same, so first of all, I think it's because he put his ego himself aside. But perhaps beyond that, generally speaking, you notice that to go speak to Pharaoh, it was Aaron, his representative. He had a spokesperson. So using a spokesperson where he couldn't get the message out clear enough. And remember, Yisro himself said to him, Moshe, you can't handle this all by yourself. You're going to need a system where you have delegating responsibilities. So there is a combination of that. And you could say that perhaps that idea that Moshe himself recognized that life is filled with ups and downs, like the moon, waxing and waning. It's not only about spirituality. This is very realistic. You talk about how Moshe spoke to the people. And in general in life, we see, yes, Moshe had the speech impediment, and not everything was rosy and hunky-dory. And some of the commentaries talk about his children. They didn't necessarily follow in his footsteps. And Moshe did have descendants who were not so righteous. And that certainly couldn't have been a pleasure to him. And certainly there are many great thinkers who talk about the pitfalls, the challenges, the struggles of leadership. And I could say myself, as a rabbi, and I'm certainly not one of the great leaders of the community, and yet I find that oftentimes so many rabbinic responsibilities come my way that the children, my own children, pay a price for it, because all of a sudden, what am I going to do? Somebody who's unfortunately dominant, or if I've taken on to do a Hatzalah shift, and my family knows I'm not available tonight, even though my kids would really love to be there with me and that I be there for bedtime, but daddy's not available for bedtime tonight. Or whatever else it might be. I have to get an article done tonight because I promised this magazine or that publication. And I feel, and I don't know how one, balances it. These are the ups and downs of life. And it's not just about spiritual matters. Like we said, the wheel of fortune grinds on. And unfortunately, I've seen many situations try not to divulge people's confidence, confidentiality, and talk about, yesterday's millionaire, sometimes tomorrow's pauper. I've seen it.
What was it called? The Juggler and the King.
Pardon?
But there's a book called The Juggler and the King.
The Juggler and the King. Okay, I'm not familiar with it.
No, this is how you get things done. You have to juggle. You juggle.
Certainly. You definitely have to juggle the responsibilities. So on one hand, I feel like my kids do know and get to see that their dad is involved in communal matters. And I think my children, to some degree, will see the importance of community. But I certainly hope I could find the right balance, that they won't think that the community always comes before them. And that's been a debate that's gone on for, I once posed this question to my shul a number of years ago, and I was shocked by some of the responses. We were sitting at the bracha on the Shabbos, and I was repeating something that I heard at a Kinos HaShluchim. I went to a conference of Chabad rabbis in New York, and at the conference, it's amazing what the Kinos offers. There's so many seminars and sessions and workshops and classes. If you want to study, you want to just catch up on studying Torah, you want to network and connect with your friends, you want to attend a workshop on fundraising or on whatever you need. Okay, there's a plethora, such a variety of classes one could take, and it's really worthwhile if one could afford. They don't charge very much to attend the Kinos. The Rebbe set 30-something years ago, when the Kinos went international, or close to 40 years ago, the Rebbe set the fee at $36, and he said he was paying the rest, but he wanted there was an idea that each person should participate in the costs. I could tell you back in the days when I used to give my classes live in person, I found that those who participated some way or another in the classes, from a cost perspective. So when somebody contributed, and not necessarily was it always money. I found that people who contribute perhaps in other ways were also committed, but at least they contributed something. There was a commitment. And I found those who didn't pay a fee or contribute one way or another, were not committed to the classes. They came when they wanted, they didn't come when they didn't want. And, I don't think they gained out of it as much. I find this myself in the past week in quarantine. I signed up to some classes, and there was one course I signed up for, said even $1, just pay one. They want to see your commitment. So the Rebbe said that $36 was the fee for the 5-day Kinos conference. And they really take care of us. But of course, we have to pay for our flight to get there. And those who don't have family in New York have to find accommodations. There are other costs involved. Anyways, I digress. You see what an introduction I give to tell the story. But the question was posed to us by Rabbi Weinreb. Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, many of you have seen him at the Kinos, at the Sinai and Dabe here in Johannesburg. He spoke here and told amazing stories and his experiences as the head of the Orthodox Union. First of all, he's a doctor, he's a psychologist. He was also a rabbi in Maryland. And he related that once he was leaving, they were going on a family trip. And this was a long-earned family trip. And as he's leaving the house, the phone rings. The family's packed in the car. They have a station wagon. They're driving. They live in Maryland. So from Maryland to Orlando, how long is the drive? I know that from Brooklyn to Miami is maybe 20 hours or so. So from Brooklyn to Maryland is about 5 hours. And from Orlando to Miami is maybe another 5 hours. So we're looking maybe a 10 to 15 hour drive, depending on how long they're packed in the car, they're ready to go. And the phone's ringing. No cell phones in the 1980s and no caller ID. He could have just let the phone go and say, I'm off. But, something got him to answer the phone. And there it is. It is on the phone. There is an important member of his shul. Now, again, I don't know if to even use that as a qualification, what makes one person important or not. But let's say it was he was a hired rabbi, and he was not in a position like myself where I'm responsible for everything on the committee. In his instance, he worked for a shul where he was on a salary, and it's the president of the shul's mother passed away, and the funeral is only going to be in another day or two, and then there's Shiva, and there went his family's long-awaited vacation. The question he posed, to us as the rabbis in the room, what would you do? Rabbi Weinreb says to this very day, his kids remind him, and his kids are parents, and they remind him of that vacation that wasn't in 1986. I posed that question at my shul, and believe it or not, there were people who said, and maybe they're right, but at a shul where we don't charge membership and any of that, and I was told by some of again, there were different opinions, but I remember one particular person telling me, no, that's what you have to do. You have to stay behind. And I don't know if my kids would agree with that. What do you guys think? What's the right thing? Stay behind because there's no one else in the world. There's no other. Let me tell you, by the way, something. Again, I was in New York for a family holiday a couple of years back. And what happened was I got a phone call from a close friend here in Johannesburg that his father passed away. And please, could I come to officiate the funeral? It was December, January. It was, I think it was early January that year. I thought to myself, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? They don't have another rabbi. And I left my family in New York. I made my ticket a little bit early to go back to Joburg, which, by the way, took hours of working this out, packing up quickly, leaving the wife and kids behind, getting, rearranging my flight booked, changing everything. There's fees involved. And because we were supposed to come back like after the 15th when it's a little bit cheaper, I was coming back earlier, so it was even more expensive. And I arrived back and I felt I was doing the biggest favor for this person as he told me, please come. And just what I realized there were other rabbis at the funeral and at the Shiva, and then the family decided they want to do a full week of prayers. And as much as I was a good support for the family, in hindsight, it wasn't right of me to leave my family, my kids. And I'm just saying this out there. This video is out there for perpetuity. This could be debatable. Perhaps if indeed there are no other rabbis, maybe it's a different situation. Take this week as an example. I was asked to officiate 3 times at funerals this week, but I've got COVID. I can't go to officiate anybody's funeral this week, and I've had to, work on finding other rabbis to take my position in officiating those funerals. And just considering that, perhaps that's what I could have done in that situation and not leave my family, because as much as we're doing this balancing act and this juggle, the family is not just as important, I think even more important. So yeah, this is all part of that juggle, that balance. It's a question, it's debatable. It depends who you ask. I have many wonderful people who tell me, no, the family should always come first. And I agree with that, but it's not always realistic and possible. And sometimes you feel like this person is a tremendous supporter. And it shouldn't boil down to the finances and things like that, but sometimes it just does, right? This person gave a lot of money to our community, helped us build up our shul and helped us fund things. So how could I say no? Of course I'll come to the funeral. And then I come there and realize, you know what? Just as they supported our community, they were involved with other communities and they had other rabbis present. And we can't always put the family on the back burner. But I want to take it even further as we're discussing this and to realize these ups and downs, and I was mentioning what just happened. Did our lights go out? Are we still on? Can everybody see me still? I'm not sure why my lights went out. I hope the electricity is not out too. Okay, as long as you could still see me, as long as we're all still here. Anyone could answer, or could you all still see me, or is it just me here on the computer by myself?
No, we can see.
You could see me in here. Okay, I'm not sure where the lights went out. I'll deal with that later. Okay. The point I was making was about ups and downs of life. This week, the tragedies I've seen of, yesterday I mentioned a young man from our community who I was personally friends with and close with passed away. I've seen instances of people who were wealthy and lost all of it. I've seen the opposite. We've seen crazy things going on, right? And what can one say about this? What can one say about these situations, about these? Thank you, Vivian. That's very true. There'll always be another rabbi to do a funeral or other communal duty, and yet there's only one dad for the family. I agree with you, and trust me, it's a very hard lesson. I've learned it difficultly over the years, and in some instances, I've unfortunately, been there for others instead of for my own family, and learning the lesson. This week, who knows where I could have been pulled in directions, and I'm at home. I'm forced to be in the house for the family, right? So how many times have we seen these situations happening? And it's something. So just a reminder, I told you guys a story yesterday about a family who was saved from the building. I just want to show you the video. It's actually quoted in this week's Jewish Report. Not 100% accurate dates, because they said 7, and the story happened on the 13th of Tammuz. But I'll put the video on at the end of the shir just so you can see that miraculous story. You think about ups and downs and situations. But the point I'm making is that everyone's got ups and downs and struggles and tribulations and challenges. And the calm, you look up to the sky, Kiddush Levana. The calm, glowing ball in the night sky just looks down on us, and it's telling us that this is the natural order of the world. This is the script that God wrote for this lovely world. It's one big roller coaster ride, my friends, ups and downs, and we have to hold on tight through the dips, and we'll make it back to the top. You ever go on that Ferris wheel, where you go on the merry-go-round ride, and sometimes it's a little bit more fluctuating. Let's look at the words of the wisest of men, of Shlomo HaMelech. And I know that we've done this type of shir a few times. And whenever I have the opportunity to give it from a different angle and from a different perspective, I do so, because this is a very personal, I find this to be one of my personal topics that I find that people oftentimes forget about. When people go through difficulties, we have to be there with them. We have to realize ourselves as well that life is this one big roller coaster ride. So let's read the words of Shlomo HaMelech. In fact, there are many songs as a little kid, I remember knowing the song. Everything has an appointed season, and there is a time for every matter under heaven. Says Shlomo HaMelech, Eis laledes ve'eis lamus. Every person who's to be born is destined to die. What does he say? Eis latas ve'eis laker natua. There's a time to plant and there's a time to uproot that which is planted. We have to remember this. These are profound words of King Solomon. There's a time to kill and there's a time to heal. There's a time to break and there's a time to build. There's a time to weep and there's a time to laugh. A time of wailing and a time of dancing. A time to cast stones and a time to gather stones. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to rend and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. We've previously analyzed the in-betweens of some of these, which is beautiful insight as well. Really, we've seen these ups and downs. The world was created and built in such a way that things don't always stay the same. There are different seasons, different occasions, different types of people, different moods. And this is exactly what Shammai was saying in the Barditchever's interpretation of that story. What was, this individual comes and says, I want a one-foot Judaism. I want only the good, happy, go-lucky times. I want only the joys. And you know what Shammai says to him? There's no such thing as a one-foot Judaism. It doesn't work. The dance of life is up and down. We have to know the lows are only part of a bigger picture that ends with the highs. No person's only going to be on top of the Ferris wheel. We have to know that when we're on top, we have to appreciate the gift. When we're wealthy, we have to be generous. When we're well, we should be there for others. And God forbid, when we're down, we have to encourage ourselves and those around us who are also down to pick themselves up, to dust off our knees, to keep on going, to keep and appreciating the blessings of life, because life indeed is full of blessings. And here I want to share with you the profound words that the Frierdiker Rebbe, he says here in one of his discourses. He says, and it really sums up the idea of the fluctuation of life across the spectrum, from the physical to the spiritual. So let's read these words, this insight together. He says, a person does not stay consistently in one place. Rather, their situation changes from time to time. This applies in a physical regard. At times one is wealthy and at times poor, at times successful and at times not. Sometimes a person excels in one area but not in another. It applies also in the spiritual regard. Not all times are equal. At times one's mind and heart are more open and capable. At other times, they're less so. We see this in a daily sense as well. One day a person awakens happy, good spirits, clear and calm mind, to grasp well what he studies and able to pray with passion and fervor. Another day awakens downtrodden, disheartened for no apparent reason, unable to focus in study and prayer. And here, my friends, let's just put this here, the punchline. This is what he says. Yet, one is not to be discouraged by this. Rather, carry on with the divine service, and eventually the low will bring a greater high than before. I think that itself is a profound idea that we should learn, because what Kiddush Levana is teaching us, what do we learn from the moon and from this monthly celebration where we come first? What?
Some of that.
Some of what? Powered. Here you go. Yeah, let's stay right here, okay? So what are we taking from this whole story? What we learn from the moon's waxing and waning, it's a lesson for each of us, especially this time that we're going through right now. Life is full of ups and downs, and this is a script that God wrote for the world. And that's the lesson that Shammai was telling to this aspiring convert. He was telling him, this is the story of life. When we learn to appreciate the ever-changing pulse of life, right? Just feel your pulse right there. It's pumping. And we're not discouraged by it. We embrace it and we move forward. We realize this is the dance of life. And that's why we dance at Kiddush Levana. Oh, maybe one of the reasons we dance. We're obviously joyous and celebrating. But the up and down movement of the dance is also telling us life is full of ups and downs. It's a dance. Celebrate now. And that life fluctuates. It's not limited to spiritual, as we said. This is about every aspect and area of life, the physical, the spiritual. And so we're going to wrap it up today with, well, just now. All right, life is forever going to be tumultuous. We all agree. You've said it a million times, right? The wheel of fortune, it's not going to stop turning. But is that it? Will there ever come a point when we finally could breathe a sigh of relief? Are we always going to have to deal with his ups and downs? This is the message, perhaps, of Kiddush Levana. We have to know that we're not going to be stuck in this place that there's only ups and downs, but there will be a time, a much better time that we look forward to, when life will be all up. Because yes, it's nice and beautiful to fluctuate, but it's even more beautiful to only go up, to only be in a good place.
I think we learn from a dance that things are not static, because a dance is not static. It moves.
True. So maybe we'll keep on dancing, but we want to be only in a joyous dance.
Yes.
And that's what we're looking forward to. That's what we're talking about here in Kiddush Levana when we mention David Melech Yisrael. We're looking forward to the day when pain and suffering, when all of the terrible loss that's going on in the world. We just had a nurse here visiting and checking on the family and telling us, you guys are in the mend. Hopefully, thank God, we're all in the positive direction with all this. Well, positive, not these days. You don't want to necessarily be positive in every sense of the word. But she was telling us how, it's mostly elderly people who aren't well. The young people, for the most part, are coming through strong. Yes, I could tell you firsthand, young people who aren't. But that's what she was telling us from her experience of visiting patients. And we want that to come to an end where people are suffering. We want to be able to enjoy life and enjoy the endless journey of climbing higher and higher, not to look back. A week or two ago when there was a public holiday, took our family to the Hennep's River for a hike. It wasn't easy the whole time, but these champions, they did close to 10 Ks of hiking, and they had to get across a river of water on a I don't know what that was, some kind of a makeshift, what do they call it again? Some mechanism to get across where you enjoy the climb. And there we're talking about, of course, when Mashiach comes, then there will be no more evil, no more negativity, no more problems. Failure will be abolished, and it will be replaced with this endless supply of positivity. And that, of course, is the world we're looking forward to. So today, the moon dances. When Mashiach comes, it will be a different dance. It's not, the moon will shine forever. As we say in the prayer, it will shine as bright as the sun. And this is what we've been talking about. We talk about, yes, we have our struggles and ups and downs, but one day we're going to finally be in a place where we could just shine bright. And that's what we pray in the Kiddush Levana prayer. What we're saying in this prayer is that we don't want to just dance, we want to shine. We want the Levana, the moon, should also have, and that's what does it say in the prayer? That Hashem will fill the moon's blemish, will restore it to its original glory. That it's not an abstract prayer about astronomy. It's a moving plea about the destiny of the entire world. That's what Kiddush Levana is. And every single month, in the middle of the month, or as early as we can, from the third or seventh day, depending on if you want to follow the Chabad custom or depending on where in the world you are, because like we said yesterday, in certain countries where you don't know if you'll have another chance to see the moon again, or even here in the summer when we get our rainy season, it's also a good idea if you're not sure when's the next time you'll see the bright moon. So this, my friends, is the point. And this I think is, let me take another verse from our Parsha this week, because this is another verse that the Talmud focuses on and speaks of the idea that we bring the sacrifice on Rosh Chodesh. It's actually my son's Torah portion this week that he was meant to read. And here in this verse, we see something that we find an indication that God regretted, so to speak, the fact that he made the moon smaller. This is something from the Talmud. The Talmud looks at this verse. It says in the verse that we bring one young male goat as a sin offering for God. Asks the Gemara, for what reason does the offering on the first day of the month differ that the verse says, La Hashem? So the Gemara is asking, why specifically mentioning here that let's put the verse back on. That we bring the male goat to sin offering to God. Why does it say specifically here to God? Says the Gemara, the Holy One, blessed is He, said, bring atonement for me, for Hashem, because I diminished the moon. So unlike all the other sacrifices, the offering of Rosh Chodesh is using this word, that we bring this as an offering to God. Excuse me. The reason is the Talmud says that it's a very interesting way of putting this. The fact that God directs to bring atonement for something that God did, which is, as the Gemara says here, because I diminished the moon. The fact that God needs atonement for shrinking the moon. But this tells us that, at least the way the Talmud is putting this, that even though the shrinking of the moon was calculated, it was deliberate, there was a reason why God did it, but it's not meant that that's the way it should be. It's not going to stay that way forever. And of course, we understand and we appreciate that just like the moon, we have our ups and downs, but God himself is saying that there'll be a time when the moon will forever shine bright. And likewise, we look forward to a time of stability when we could be shining bright. And so that's the era of Mashiach. That's when the roller coaster of life will go only upward. And that's the dance we're looking forward to. And so we dance at Kiddush Levana. Yes, we're demonstrating that, but it's also a dance of looking forward to better times, of anticipating and precipitating a better era when we won't have that trouble, when we no longer have these problems of life. And it's interesting, very interesting discourse of one of the previous Rebbes, where he talks about the general motions of a dance. We're going back and forth and getting closer and further from each other. There's that constant tension. But there's another type of dance where you actually stay close and near to your dancing partner, and you're always moving forward together. Different types of dances out there. In a group dance, it's that everyone holds hands in a circle and you're moving in sync. You're never stepping backward. very much of a Hasidic style dance. And so the Rebbe Maharash says that's the dance of Mashiach that we want to look forward to. So that's really what we want. Let's look at it right here. He says, regarding the era of Mashiach, it is stated, the maiden will be joyous with dance. The reference to a certain type of dance, which is in a circle called the karahod. I think it's a Russian word or a Yiddish word. This dance does not have any steps of distance, which represent the future time. Will there no longer be any distance from God. So my friends, please God, that's what we look forward to. We ask our Father, our loving Father in heaven, to have mercy on all of us, on all of humanity, especially in our South African community, and to end this waxing and waning of life. We want that real dance where we could just be joyous and celebrate. And hopefully that will be the ultimate dance, the dance of Mashiach, the dance of a perfected world. That's the dance that we look forward to. And really, I hope that we'll get to celebrate that dance speedily in our times. Any questions? What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to unshare this. And I'm going to share with you a video of the story I told you yesterday, an interview with one of the TV channels interviewing this woman, describing the incident of coming home and seeing how her building is just like that, collapsing. She describes it herself because I told you the story. You know, sometimes I tell you stories as I read them or heard them. But in this instance, I want to share it with you since I told you the story yesterday, and now I actually saw it on a TV channel. So I want to show it to you as it was. So let me share my screen. Just a second. And here we go.
For all the questions that may never have answers, and for everything we've yet to learn, there is this, and we couldn't be happier to bring it to you. A mother and her 2 children are safe tonight, and they might not have been. Sarah Neer was at home not long before the tower fell, like seconds before the tower fell, along with her daughter Hani, one of the 2 children who were there. Thank you both so much for being with us. Sarah, I want people to understand how close this really was. It was late, you know, or early in the morning, 12:30. 12:40 in the morning, you were doing emails and then you heard a sound. What happened?
Exactly. I just came from a party, like spiritual party was, and it was 12:30 and it was a little bit noisy. My son and my daughter been around me, so I didn't pay attention to the surrounding. So about 12:45, she went to take a shower and my son was busy. So suddenly it was quiet. I was sitting and checking my emails and my messages. And then I started to hear knocking sounds, knock, knock, knock here and knock, knock. And I said, okay, somebody probably hanging pictures on the wall. And then it was more intense. And I said, oh, probably they're doing some small renovation. And then suddenly around 1:10, I hear like a smash, the wall is collapsing, the wall above me. And I said, wow, they're really doing major construction. I need to take care of this problem. It was already 1:10 in the morning, so it doesn't make sense. So I ran to the security guy that I live in the ground floor, so it's first floor. So it's really a wall separated between my apartment to the security guy. And I ran to him and I said, do you hear this sound? It doesn't make sense in the middle of the night, early morning, people doing construction. So he said, yeah, I hear this also noises. So I said, so what do you do about that? The minute I said, what do you do about, then it was a big boom. And I was running to see where the sound come from, and I saw all the garage collapse. I couldn't believe it. I thought I'm in a movie. I look again and I ran back to the hallway and I saw my 2 kids standing next to the door, the entrance of my apartment, and don't move. And I was screaming, it's an earthquake, an earthquake. I was thinking very fast. I said, it's not construction, it's an earthquake. And while I was running, I told the security guy, call the police. put the alarm so people will, you know, be aware about this. So, but my daughter was looking at me. I said, but I'm with my bathrobe. I said, I don't care. Run as fast as much as you can. She was running with her brother towards the exit of the building. And the security guy, he was shocked. He didn't know what to do. I said, call the police. And he said, but what is the address of this building?
He didn't even know.
He didn't know. He was so confused. And I said, 877. I said, no, write for me. And I told my son, fast, write for him. And he wrote. And we ran out of the building. And I told my kids, run as fast as you can, crossing the street. We crossed Collins. We just crossed Collins. God watched us. God was waiting for us to leave the building. And then another big boom. And then we didn't see anything. It was suddenly quiet after the big boom. And it was white clouds all over. And I thought I'm by myself in this world. And I thought we were still running. And I told my son, call the police again, call the police again. And probably my son was looking. He was very curious to see. I didn't tell them to watch what's going on in the back. But probably he looked and he saw the building collapse. But I said, it's an earthquake. We don't know what is safe, where is the ground is safe. Run, and we're still running and running. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't do anything. And I said, God help, God help. And I didn't know what to do. We've been really running like 3-4 blocks away from this building. And then I said, I need to breathe. So I said, I need to knock at somebody's house to help me. I couldn't do anything anymore. So my kid said, Mommy, it's already late. Nobody will open the door. I said, it's an earthquake. People need to know maybe to help us. Suddenly a guy came with his big dog, looking at the window. And I said, please open the door. I cannot breathe. He said, no.
Honey, when you heard the sounds and your mother tells you have to go, what did you think was going on?
I just, in the beginning, because I was in the shower, so I thought like in the beginning someone was doing construction also. So I thought when I was going to go out of like the bathroom, I was going to see inside the living room like planks of wood, because like maybe the construction, like so I thought like someone like was like doing damage into our apartment. And then I like ran out and I see like just like white particles just like coming at me. And then I was like, this is not normal. So then I ran out of the apartment, but I was like, at the same time, I'm with a rope and a towel. Like, I'm not really going out in public like this. So in the beginning, like, no one really thinks, like, in the beginning, in the moment, you're just shocked. You're like, what's going on? Like, things are just collapsing, but you don't know, is the whole building about to collapse? Like, you don't know what's going on.
I know this is your first time back anywhere near the building. Just what does it feel like to be here?
Now I see how great the miracle was, and it's painful and scary because I see what really happened, and how many people, we don't know what's happened to them really. I don't want to say, we don't know. And I said how lucky we've been, and thank God what's happened. And we've really be safe of this trauma, but we are still in trauma. The recovery, the pains that we and probably other people going through, you cannot even measure, you cannot really say, I'm speechless, don't know what to tell you, because it's when I enter this site over here, I said the first time I'm very close. I didn't want to come close to the area even. And it's so much pain like I'm going through now. Like
I know you feel that God is watching you, and I'm so glad that you made it out. I'm so glad you listened to your intuition. And for you, Hani, listen to your mother. I think that's one of the lessons here. I'm so glad you're well, and I wish you the best going through this. I know it's hard.
I want just to thank also God really help us, and also all the crews that really helping. The community is amazing, try to help in any ways they can do. So really I thank everybody that is here and try to do their best.
Thank you very much, both of you. Be well.
Thank you.
Next.
Okay, ladies and gents, just thought I should share that video with you, the story I mentioned yesterday. And with that, we'll conclude our share here today. Thank you all for joining. Hope you're all well. Wishing you all a great day. And see you, please God, next week, right here. Here's the Barbie boy. Say hello, everyone.
Mazel tov, mazel tov.
Thank you.
Mazel tov from the whole Finkelstein family.
Mazel tov. Mazel tov.
And Thank you all. Really appreciate it. See you next week. All the best.
Only simchas. God bless.
Amen. Thank you.